the turning point, I guess, is in two places. So I think that it's radicalizing for people who have had the experience that we have, where they're watching this video and they're seeing their cities and their country kind of overrun by a masked police force that seems to have complete immunity as far as the government is concerned. Like, that was the scariest thing that JD Vance said about Officer Russ, when he said he has complete immunity. And I was like, I'm already mad enough that the Supreme Court told Donald Trump that he does. Like, get out of here with this idea that a police officer isn't responsible for his actions, or an ICE officer that, adhere to the same standard. And then, so I think it's radicalizing for people who think like us, but I think it's also radicalizing for normal Americans who are not paying attention to this, but are saying, we elected you to lower our grocery prices. We elected you to care about what school supplies cost, what healthcare costs. And you're out there doing everything from capturing Maduro to backing an officer that's shooting a woman sitting in her car with her wheels clearly turned to the right, to God knows what we're doing with Greenland, and to, have huge bashes at Mar-a-Lago where pay for play schemes are unfolding all over the place. So I think those two turning points are kind of adding up to what we're seeing in terms of this big backlash against the administration.
Yeah, that's right. I also think it's because, you know, I have now been doing these focus groups for almost a decade, but at least 8 years, really in earnest, as I watch the Trump administration unfold. And it is, people are always like, why isn't this the thing? Why isn't the bottom falling out? Why isn't this enough? And there's a bunch of reasons for that. There's the hyperpolarization of it all. There's the fact that Trump often moves from one catastrophe to another. And so, like, by the time you're enraged about one catastrophe, like, you're on to the next thing, which is what is happening right now. Like, we're going from Minneapolis to him threatening the Fed chair, Jerome Powell. And it's like, that sustained outrage is really hard. The thing about ICE and what is happening is, number one, I do think I was similar in this regard. We've always kind of described ourselves similarly, which is like kind of Republican squishes. But for me, a lot of came from a small town, and so I was sort of culturally conservative. But mainly, I just really like America. I think America is the best. Not right now. But generally, I've always been somebody who thinks the experiment that we are doing here is important, should be preserved, promoted, emulated. And right now, like, that conservative instinct of your American birthright is, you do not have to get down on your knees for tyrants. Like, that is what we do here. We say no to tyranny. The whole reason we exist is that. Like, it's in our bloodstreams, it's in our creed. Like, and so I feel like there is an element, even of people who are like, well, ICE is supposed to be getting immigrants out of here, right? They take their blood and soil nationalism very seriously. They still are uncomfortable with masked agents. Like, instinctually, Americans are uncomfortable with masked agents roaming the streets of America, shooting Americans in the face because they are protesting, which is what she was doing. She wasn't meaningfully blocking traffic. And imagine if every time the libs stopped traffic, which they do all the time in D.C., when the traffic's really bad, like there's a protest on that bridge somewhere, cops just started shooting them. What if the cops had opened fire on January 6th and started shooting people in the face? Like, the only reason they shot Ashley Babbitt, like, when you watch the footage, she was trying to break into the congressional chamber with a mob at her back of thousands of people. She was in the front. Like, these are not the same thing. But I also think Americans can start to see what is building here, which is Trump is putting together his own personal army, and they are trying to normalize for us the idea that we cannot challenge them, that it is not okay to challenge them. And these are the times, I think, look, all of the Trump administration is us making choices about what we spend our limited nervous system outrage on. How much of that can we spare? And, like, this is one of those times when it overwhelms us. Like, we don't have to choose whether or not we get exercised about this. It's overtaking us because you can see in every second of that video and in the government's reaction how un-American it all is and how much they are lying to us. And that makes me afraid in ways that I am often more circumspect than some of my colleagues about, like, what our threat level should be. This is the highest my threat level has ever been watching this.
Yeah, it's interesting to kind of watch how you're feeling in contrast to like what the thumbnail says. I don't know if you've ever like, taken a look through the YouTube pages. Like last week I was with Ben Mycelis from the Midas Touch, and like those headlines sell, right? Like you get people to click on things, and everyone, needs to be part of the algorithm. And it does feel like a moment where real life is matching the thumbnail
Yeah.
almost, and that's scary for me. And the scariest, I guess, extension of that is that this is what the administration wants. Like
Yeah.
Stephen Miller has never been happier, because if we are in a chaos moment, or what you can market as a chaos moment, then we can have more troops in the streets, and we can have people watching us when we go to vote in November, and we are going to have less people who probably want to vote in person as a result of this, more so than we would usually have. And you're seeing folks like, I don't know if you saw the protests outside of all of these Somali owned businesses in St. Cloud. Like people are, it feels like there's almost a spirit within them that are like pulling them off of the couch, and they're saying, I've got to get out there, and I've got to make my presence felt, make my voice heard, just show some line of solidarity with people who hold similar values to me. And having a government where it's so clearly that we don't understand what's important about America or what America is founded on, as this administration, I don't think I've experienced before. Like I didn't enjoy the Bush administration for sure. I grew up in New York City. Very vivid memories of George Bush post 9/11, right? Throwing out the pitch, the whole thing. Like throughout it, I disagreed with, going into Iraq, but I knew that George Bush loved America,
Yes.
right? And that it was in defense of something that I could understand as well, and had been taught in school was what America was about, and learned at home from very liberal parents what America was about. And we're not seeing that at all here. I'm curious to get your take on this before we switch over to talking about Powell. So, ICE's popularity totally in the toilet, overall approval for immigration also gone down. That was his best issue that he just completely squandered
Yes.
away seemingly for no reason. What do you make of kind of the conservative move to have a discussion? I think it's really maligning Renee Good's character and who she is. So that's obviously part of it. But, when they say ICE needs to be able to do its job, and I have seen the lists of bad hombres that ICE has picked up and gotten out of this country, even in the Minneapolis area, like a guy who's sodomizing kids, people who are raping Americans. Like, I don't want those people here. Like,
Nobody
I don't
wants
know. Exactly. And so, how do you think that we can thread the needle better, or how is there some way to build a relationship with? I mean, Tom Homan is coming off as the most reasonable one in the bunch compared to Stephen Miller and Kristi Noem at this point, and he seems to understand that like the worst first is probably the right way to go about this. So like, how do you think we can approach that and also take that message? I don't know if you listened to Brian O'Hara, the police chief from Minneapolis, on the Daily, but he was talking about how regular cops can't do their jobs because of what ICE is doing. Because ICE actually has a very specific purview, right? Like they can't actually police traffic, which like what Renee Good was doing, that was a police infraction, not an ICE infraction. Like how can we start talking the same language, I guess, about this? Because I don't like seeing liberals being knee-jerk defensive, like ICE doesn't belong at all. And like, I think in this incarnation, it probably doesn't, but like, we have to get those people out. And when you look like you're on the side of letting a guy go who might have sodomized a few kids because they're doing all this other bad stuff, I feel like we lose the argument with more conservative leaning folks.
I do think that Democrats, I do think they understand that the way that Biden handled the border was
Bad.
bad. Yeah, did not advance their goals. And here's the thing, and just overall, Americans want to feel safe. Like it is actually, having listened to Americans for 8 years, there's sort of just like three key things they really want. They want to be able to afford stuff that includes health care, right? They want to feel like they're not underwater or on a treadmill. They want access to good education, affordable health care, like just the things that take care of your basic needs. The next level of that is they want to feel safe, right? So, like when it comes to crime and when it comes to immigration, and part of understanding the immigration story is to understand that the way that Trump has told it is not just about immigration. It is about crime. It is about economic anxiety, right? Like they're it's about drugs. Like it's a story wrapped up in a lot of fear that people have. And so if you're a Democrat, you have got to stop saying that it's all just about being racist, right? You have got to understand, especially if you want a strong social safety net for people, that costs money that people have to pay into, and everybody can't come. Like there has to be an orderly system.
Right.
There has to be a legal system, and Americans are not irrational and racist for wanting to have a workable immigration system. Because the other part of Americans is that they still, with all of Trump's ridiculousness, they still generally think immigration is good and positive. They just want, and this is sort of the moral alibi here in the focus groups all the time, is they say, I want them to come the right way. Now, Americans, because they don't have to go through the immigration system, do not know what that means. They just mean whatever the system is, whatever is legal, where we know who's in our country, come that way. That is a totally rational and reasonable thing to expect. It is a totally rational and reasonable thing to say the thing that I pay taxes for the most is so my kids get a good education, and so there's a police force that protects me from bad guys that are out there, right? And so they want those things, and Democrats are going to have to start like table ante for politics. Is I'm going to think about your material well-being, I'm going to think about your safety, and then like I'm not going to be so annoying on social issues. like that's sort of it. It's those three things. If Democrats could correct those, they would be in a million times better position than they are currently. But they have to start from the proposition that their job as public officials is to keep people safe.
Yeah. Are Democrats asking you for that advice? Because I really hope that they are and that you're giving it to them.